Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
And I'm Kayode Kikulu. Thank you for joining us.
Well, this morning, as you can see, we're set to take you through the paper straight away. It's day, I don't even know how many days into the process now. Well, Mr. Daya Akintobi joins us this morning. He's publisher of TCN. Joins us to ride with us on this papers review. Thanks so much for your time this morning. I will begin with the Nigerian Tribune, of course. NSAS protests is what the paper leads with. NSAS protests turned bloody as the first line that pops at you on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Buhari assures errant policemen will be dealt with. Says scrap of SARS first step in police reform. Orders investigation into Ogbomoso killings. Policeman civilian shot dead in Lagos. Hoodlum trying to free suspected kidnapper, not protester, killed in Surulere, Lagos. Government explains. Let me take that again for clarity. Hoodlum trying to free suspected kidnapper, not protester, killed in Surulere, Lagos. Government explains. Makinde deploys Operation Burst, tells police to take back seat. Now is good moment for police reforms. Osinbajo, PDP demands complete overhaul and restructuring. So Mr. President and, of course, the Vice President are on the same page on this matter, talking about the police reforms. But then, which of them stands out to you this morning?
I find it a bit troubling that in spite of the fact that both the President, the Vice President, and the Inspector General have all affirmed the disbanding of SARS, that the protests continue to escalate. I'm starting to get a bit concerned now that other elements are creeping in to where it's starting to verge on getting out of hand. I think the fact that the President, who is normally a bit aloof from speaking publicly and engaging the public on things that are happening, for him to have actually addressed this yesterday, I think unlike in the past where it seems to have been half-hearted measures to reform these errant agencies, particularly SARS, I think there's a full commitment now to actually see to progressive change. I think the government is sensitive to the fact that these protests are serious. I think they've looked at what's happening and they recognize the fact that people are fed up and people have had enough. And you can see it in the tenure of the protests that all of a sudden Nigeria's youth have woken up and said, enough is enough. We're not taking this anymore. But then, so government has become sensitive to that.
Well, that's on the one hand. On the other hand is the fact that, okay, so just as you said, the protests continue. Couldn't that be speaking to the fact that the communication is not quite there yet?
Well, I saw a 5-point agenda of what the protesters are asking for, which seem to go a bit further than what the government has agreed to do, although some of the items are they're similar. They want prosecution. They want every protester released. They want prosecution of errant cops who have violated people's rights. They want reform of the pay packages and compensation for police. And I think to a large extent, what the IG has said and what the President has said speak to those concerns. The President has said reform of SARS is just the first step in a systemic overhaul of the entire police force. We have to remember that by disbanding SARS, the officers that are already in SARS, they're going to be redeployed back into the police, but they still have the same cultural orientation and they will still have the same arms, the same guns, everything else. So wherever they are in the police does not necessarily mean that the abuses will not continue.
And I think that's one of the issues the protesters have, saying that these men, they'll still be in the police. They might change, the operations or the unit or the team they're with. But, you think that there probably shouldn't be more protests, basically because the government seems to be sensitive, has made some announcements. But clearly the protesters say, we're not satisfied. And I think when you say this has probably grown bigger, are you saying maybe there's some influence from somewhere trying to, thwart this? Or there's just general, people are just not exactly happy with the way things are going. So maybe it's not exactly just the police issue. Maybe they look at the economy, they look at the way their representatives act. Maybe this is bigger than just end SARS or something.
I think one of the biggest things fueling this is youth unemployment. If you see from a lot of the news reports, you see that youths are very angry in this country at the moment. They don't have much trust in the administration. If there were more trust in governance at the moment, the fact that the president, the vice president, and the inspector general of police have all spoken and assured the nation that there will be change in terms of that should have quelled the protests a bit, but rather it's escalating, which means that people are not taking the government at its word, and that is probably based on a history of broken promises in the recent past. It also speaks to the fact that there's a lot of youth unemployment, bad governance. There are things that are really making the youth of this country upset, and they have a lot of grievances. So I think that is reflecting in the tenure of the protests at this moment.
Then a number of people are also wondering how far this could go, because, I mean, looking at the way they received, the governor of Lagos yesterday, or not received him, and whether or not members, their representatives at the various legislative branches at the federal and state levels don't seem to be coming out to them, stuff like that. Could that also be something that maybe, if those ones came out, maybe it would make any difference?
Well, when you look at the reception of the Lagos State governor yesterday, to where he was actually appealing and pretty much begging and saying, we're looking at this, I'm going to Abuja tomorrow to meet President Buhari to see how we can sort this out. They were not responsive to his entreaties. They were rather dismissive of him, and at some point even the deputy governor got into fisticuffs, almost got into fisticuffs with some of the protesters when they pushed him, and things started to happen like that. I think that at this point in time it's gotten beyond the point where symbols of authority, if the president speaks up and they say, we don't believe you, and the vice president backs it up and says, we're not accepting what you say, legislators, I don't think will make much of a difference. But I think part of the grievance is directed at NAS itself. I think the youth are very dissatisfied with the payment packages of our legislatures, their terms and conditions of their existence. So I think they're seeking an entire overhaul. Even if it didn't start out that way, it is metamorphosing now into a holistic viewpoint of protesting against various types of abuses and excesses.
Well, there's still much to talk about this today on the program, so just keep it locked. Well, of course, those images on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune also tell you, of the various areas, and of course a number of other papers will do that as well. Tanker explosion kills 9 in Osun, 8 dead in Ogun, Lagos Delta auto crashes. Find that story on page 27 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Among other stories is, of course, this one that I'm sure you're aware of. Edo Assembly Speaker impeached. It's interesting. It's just 10 members out of a whole lot, 24 or thereabout. 10 members, all 9 agreed to remove one speaker and automatically brought in another one and swore him in yesterday.
Funnily, this particular individual crossed carpets a few days ago and switched parties, and he probably already was reading the tea leaves and saw this coming and thought that by expressing loyalty to the party in power, that might save his job. But no, it didn't. I think, although on the surface the charges are high-handedness, allegations of financial impropriety, but I think probably what's playing out here is a quid pro quo type arrangement between the powers that be in the PDP and the current administration, because there had to have been some sort of trade-off in the run-up to the election that enabled Governor Baseki to walk in and walk away with the PDP ticket. As a result, I'm sure he had to make some promises of some payoff to the PDP structure in the state in return for their giving him the ticket. So that may be what's playing out here.
Well, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. Lead story: more EndSARS protests rock Lagos, Osogbo, Ilorin, Abuja. In fact, the pictures on the front page show Calabar also. And you see one of the protesters with the placard, "You messed with the wrong generation."
I said it a minute ago, the youth have woken up. And our generation has been accused of having been too passive, too docile, and too willing to lay back and say, let's accept things the way they are. Let's not foment trouble. Things will get better. We live in hope. But the youth of today have really had it up to here in terms of, especially because of youth unemployment in Nigeria.
Oh, huge one. And you see the riders, look like 2 paragraphs, just riders for that story. Commuters spend hours in gridlock as protesters shut Lagos. Sanwo-Olu sues for calm. I mean, I was in that traffic yesterday. It was raining, by the way, late yesterday, and, spent like hours. I mean, a trip that was meant to take, 30 minutes? See people spending hours. And for a lot of them, they were happy to spend that time in protest, in the traffic. But I was just wondering, some people had emergencies, you'd expect. I'm sure there were ambulances in those traffic. So, it's just...
spent up to 5 hours on the spot.
You see, CSO petitions US, UK, EU to place visa ban on Oyo Police CP family members. David Omita IGP over police brutality against civilians. You see this one, disbanding SARS, first step to extensive police reforms, says Buhari. You touched on that earlier. Orders investigation into Oyo killing, says few bad eggs shouldn't be allowed to tarnish forces' image. There's a lot, really, so I'll just allow you go through those riders when you pick up a copy of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. And right under the big pictures, you see, I'm shocked Akure people turned against me. Akere Dolu. That's, of course, reviewing the Ondo governorship election. And I'm sure he was looking at the results from different areas, and he saw Akure and he thought, wait a minute, I thought this was locked. So what played out here?
It's interesting to see. Quite possibly because one or two of his supporters may have come from that particular area. It looks like each of the candidates won their senatorial district, or at least within the area of where they're from. But I think Governor Akere Dolu would do well to look at that and see what it is about his first term that the Akure people didn't think he did well about. Perhaps there's not been, Akure being the capital, you would expect that a lot more development and a lot more visible signs.
At least they're closer to the seat of government, right?
Absolutely. No, the government is seated in Akure.
And that's what I'm saying,
yes.
they're closer to the seat of
the
government.
The people are closer, yes, of course they are. So they should be the first ones to get the dividends of democracy. Yeah. So you should look at that in his second term and say, clearly I didn't satisfy the people, because we've had precedent in the past where people contestants have won in areas that's not their home senatorial district. So your performance says a lot, depending on how well you do in your first term, says a lot about how the people will respond to you when you're seeking re-election. So it needs to work a bit harder.
So this is not a time for payback, looking through, they didn't vote for me, so let's set them aside. This is not a time for that. Everybody needs to feel the government, right?
Our politics has grown beyond that.
Well, let's hope so. And this sad one, 9 persons die as 2 tankers collide on Osun Highway. We seem to be having more of these articulated vehicles accidents. Really sad one. It's on page 6. A couple of other stories. You see the Northern leaders root for 12-state structure. I mean, restructuring is still in the news. 100% resource control. It's on page 23. I'm not going to get into that restructuring conversation this morning because I know it might take some time. So hopefully we'll get into that. But sports page, quickly. The lead story for Vanguard Sports, countdown. Raw tells Nigerians, our target is AFCON qualifiers. Amidst, the protests and all that, Nigeria will play a friendly later today, and Raw is telling Nigerians to count down. But, Nigerians love their football. I'll leave you there for Vanguard newspaper this morning.
And switch to the Nigerian News Direct. NSAS, Buhari vows to sanction airing officers, pledge reforms as protests turn bloody. Sanwo-Olu to meet Buhari today. Well, I guess that story you'll find on pages 3 and 5 of the paper this morning. Several other papers that might be of interest to you this morning on the front page.
Several other stories.
Yeah, several other stories that will be of interest. So many right there on the front page. Of course, the back page of the paper has sports.
The Guardian. Protesters march on. That's the lead story. And the interesting part of that lead is the fact that there are 3 dots after it, saying, well, there's more to this.
on.
Oh, yeah.
It's
And then
continuous.
you'd take campaign from NSAS to governance reforms, and
Yes.
this is growing bigger. And I'm thinking for a lot of them, they're thinking, if we're going to achieve NSAS with a protest, how about we, aim for something bigger? So maybe that's why this is getting bigger. A couple of other stories. FCT teachers chase pupils out of class over minimum wage. Isn't that displaced anger? Isn't it meant to be at the government?
Yes, indeed. And government is actually proposing better things for the teachers nowadays. There's a whole new package that's come out for teachers, including extension of their years in service, better pay.
Even though we hear that might not be in the 2021 appropriation bill.
No, it's not in the bill, so we don't quite know when it's going to happen. But it's in the cards.
It's in the works, as they say.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, that Edo Assembly story also makes its way to the front page. And finally, suspense in power sector. You wonder what that is about? Well, the Guardian newspaper has more details for you.
Daily Trust newspaper today is also focusing primarily on the protests. Despite SARS ban, protests continue. 2 killed, 3 policemen injured in Lagos. Gridlock in Abuja, Edo, Ilorin. Training of new unit operatives begins next week. That's according to the IGP. Expect extensive police reforms, says the president. That story is on page 4 of the paper this morning. And if you check right under that nameplate, you'll find 2021 Buhari Osinbajo to spend 167 million naira on food and refreshment. When you see this, it sounds like, okay, so all through 2021, we're just going to be dining and wining with 167 million naira.
Well, that looks like a whole lot of money, yes, indeed. But we have to remember that it's not just the two of them that's eating. There's family, there's aides, there's staff, there's visitors, there's state banquets. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes in under that amount of money.
Well, I guess we need to issue the memos to the public so that they can get that one. That's the Daily Trust this morning.
The Daily Times, of course, leads with NSAS again. Nigerian cities in throes of violent NSAS protests. And something from one of the protesters, one of their leaders said, well, let it be on record that we weren't violent. It was the police that tried to be violent. So you wonder, really, where's this violence coming from? That story makes its way to page 2. And there's a picture on the front page that shows, the president with, the contestant for the World Trade Organization head, that's Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and the Minister of Trade, Industry, Trade and Investment. And it's interesting that, there's been a lot of support for her. We're getting to that point where we eventually find out what happens. But the question a lot of people wonder is, what will this mean for Nigeria, really? Having our person, well, beyond that, not really our person, but at least will that translate to maybe something good for Nigeria in terms of image, economy? What exactly?
Oh, without a doubt, it puts us on the world stage. Lets the world know we are actually a player in terms of world affairs. There's never been a question as to the competence and professionalism of our Nigerian intellectuals, our academicians, our administrators have made waves all over the world. So it's only fitting for one of our intellectual giants to be at the helm of affairs of an organization like the World Trade Organization. I'm very happy that the president threw the backing of the entire federal government behind her candidacy, and they will do everything internationally, diplomatically, to push her nomination. I think the time is ripe. I think were she to ascend to that office, it would begin to repair some of our international image that's been so badly battered over the years. I think it will make people look at us in a more favorable light internationally. And I also think she's competent enough to actually make a solid difference in terms of world trade.
So definitely the whole nation, even the continent is behind her.
Yeah, and how that reflects the intellectual prowess of Nigerians in the various parts of the world, how it reflects on the nature, the attitude, the attributes of the Nigerian is another thing entirely, because if we have that quantum and quantity and quality of intellectual prowess in the world, some would wonder, so how come it's not reflecting at home?
Because they're all out there. We have not created an attractive enough environment to encourage them to come back. And I've always been an advocate of the fact that our intellectual heft in the diaspora, if we were able to repatriate it locally,
so
and bring it back here, we'd be a first world country within a decade.
You know, it's interesting when you speak to some of them. They say, "Well, I want to come home, but let's talk power, let's talk roads." And there's this story on electricity tariff. FG extends suspension of tariff by 1 week, provides relief. That is quite pregnant, but more details on page 4.
The Leadership newspaper is next this morning, and of course, it talks about just what we ended with. WTO will keep pushing till you win. PMB assures Okonjo-Iweala. That story is on page 4 of the Leadership newspaper this morning. 2023 mixed reactions trail calls for Jonathan to contest. Do you see any value in that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a lot of hype. I think it's a lot of positioning and structuring. But I think the good luck era has gone. I think it's done and dusted. I don't expect to see him back in a competitive role. I think he has embraced the role of an elder statesman and will continue to play that role.
And of course, right beside the picture of the president and Dr. Okonjo-Iweala and Minister of Trade and Investment is that story on IPIS. NAS wades into FG ASU impasse, says government can't meet all demands, urges parties to shift ground for varsities to reopen. Some have also alluded to the fact that the reason we have so many, young people on the streets is because they are not in school and ASU is on strike.
Yes, that's probably part of it, but our universities don't even have the capacity to admit all of the available youth who want to do higher education anyway. So even if the universities were open, it's still only a fraction of the youth that's out there that would be in school. I do think that the ASU strike needs to be resolved quickly. You might notice that the PTF approved for all levels of schools to reopen. Yesterday they said pre-primary, nursery, all that can open up again. So the issues of COVID that were the primary reason that the educational system got disrupted, we're overcoming that, and normalcy is going back into the schooling system. So it's a shame if all of those who are proscribed by COVID from going to school are now able to be back in school, and yet universities can't resume because of a dispute about the IPIS platform.
And I see that, pardon me, all this, they seem tied together. I just thought of the protest and a lot of, young people who should be in school, but then, of course, there's a strike.
Yes.
And then ASU is saying that, well, we're not being taken care of adequately, and the schools don't have, they're not well equipped if you look at infrastructure across schools, and that goes on and on. And you see that it appears as though Nigeria's problem, it seems like, it's what you find out in other countries, but if you actually focus on some of these issues and sort them per time when you ought to, then you won't have a spiraling of all this. Pardon me, I'm going philosophical here, but...
Okay, let's just touch on this one and then we can take that last paper. Pay as you go, not feasible. Multi-choice. That story is on page 24. You know of that call that, look, why can't we just have pay as you go for, digital television services?
Yes, there's an outcry for that because cable TV increased its prices recently, almost in tandem with the electricity tariff and petrol. So, and it's coming at a time when the economy is in a downward spiral. So, of course, people are feeling the pinch. So they're pushing cable TV, saying, we want to only pay for content that we watch. Why should we pay a bulk rate and we're only watching a fraction of those shows? But cable TV is saying technologically it's not practical. But remember also that before Glo came on board, MTN and the others said per second billing wasn't possible. Then Glo came and showed it was doable.
So you're calling for some other service provider to come?
So no, not necessarily. I'm just saying maybe they should look back at it and try to find a way to meet the wishes of the people.
Because customer is king, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Daily Independent, lead story. FG to Nigerians, prepare for second wave of COVID-19. Says states responsible for safe reopening of schools. You see, Daily Independent leads with something quite different, and that's COVID-19. Yeah, but it appears as though where we stand right now, a lot of people have totally forgotten about COVID-19. And do you see any danger here?
COVID is a clear and present danger, despite the fact that we dodged a major bullet. If you look at a population of 200 million people and we only got 60,000 odd infections, that's infinitesimal. Yesterday, the UK announced a tiered approach towards reintroducing restrictions because COVID is spiraling out of control in the UK and other countries in Europe as well. They're undergoing a second wave. So it makes sense for the PTF to be reminding us that COVID has not been eradicated. There's no vaccine yet. It is, even though we've not really embraced social distancing and all the other preventive measures, somehow, some way, something up there is really looking out for us and preventing this thing from blowing up here. But yes, it is good advice that we should keep it in the back of our minds that COVID is real, COVID is still in our midst, and we should continue to practice all the necessary preventive measures to stop a second wave from happening.
Well, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Mr. Dayo Akintobe is the publisher of TCN. Thank you so much for your time.
Always a delight to be here. Thank you.
All right, so we're back in a moment to take on the issues for the day. Please stay with us.
The Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigeria Police, otherwise known as SARS, is hereby dissolved across all formations, the 36 state police commands, and the Federal Capital Territory, where they currently exist.
It seems Nigerians are not swayed by the pronouncement of the Inspector General of Police appearing to yield to their demands by scrapping the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. That's because a day after that pronouncement, they're back on major streets across the country, continuing days of protests. According to them, the IGP's previous promises to reining the SARS operatives have had no effect. In Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, protesters blocked the Lekki tollgate end of the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway, forcing commuters and motorists on their way to work to a standstill.
We're not asking for audio disbandment. They've done it before. We're asking them that the president does it by himself on national TV.
The presidential order brought SARS to war. If he wants to remove them, he has to put his signature to it.
We're not safe in our own houses. I cannot come out of my house and be afraid if I'm going to come back or not.
Federal SARS have been disbanded. As I'm talking to you right now, they are disarming them in police command headquarters. And they have been sent to different other formations. As I'm talking to you, they are collecting the arms and weapons that SARS are using.
They insist that the president himself should make the pronouncement disbanding SARS by way of an executive order.
I think we want to just let our voice. That a couple of things. We're not just asking for ending SARS. That's one of the problems, right? We're talking about prosecution of those who have killed innocent people. So if we end it and nobody's going to jail, we're not solving the problem.
Not even pleas from the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, could stop the protesters.
He had mentioned that they are all going to be prosecuted. He had said that all of them will be prosecuted and brought to justice. Okay, we will. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
There were similar protests in other parts of Lagos, including Surulere, where protesters alleged they were shot at by police.
I've been shot at Surulere area. See front of that OPR office. They shot my leg, so I'm heading to Randu now.
Protests were also held at Maryland, at Djibouti, and the Murtala Mohammed International Airport. And in the South-South region, the protesters were also visible in Calabar, the Cross River State capital, Benin City in Edo State, and in the southeast from Onitsha in Anambra State. Youths in Jos, the Plateau State capital, also hit the streets, displaying placards with different inscriptions as they seek the release of all arrested protesters, as well as demanding justice for all deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensation for their families.
Well, welcome back to Sunrise Daily. That is what we will be discussing at this point. It's been days and days of protests. Thousands of youths across Nigeria have come out to voice their opinions, in fact, disappointment as to ways the police, especially a section of the police, SARS, has treated them in recent times. And they're saying enough is enough. Well, the IGP has announced that the SARS unit of the police has been disbanded and the men will be redeployed. The president also said, well, this is the first step to a wider reform of the Nigeria police force. But it appears as though the protesters are not satisfied. So this morning, we'll get an update with, well, one of the protesters to understand what is the thinking behind this new wave of protests, even though the president, the IGP, in fact, the National Assembly, the Speaker, governors have spoken about this. And we have joining us on the phone this morning, Bolatito Odwala, who is one of the NSAS protesters. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. Well, for those who are thinking, well, the IGP has spoken, the president has spoken, but it appears as though you are not satisfied. So the question for them is, what more do you want?
Okay, good morning. I don't think the question should be what more do they want. I think the question should be, do the people still believe in the words of the government? Because these same SARS have been claimed to be disbanded over 4 times in the last 5 years. We have an announcement in 2018. We have another announcement in 2019 that this same SARS has been disbanded now. Again, in 2020, they are telling us that they've disbanded the force. The people have lost faith in the government, and that is what you're seeing. And that is why the protests are still ongoing, because nobody believes the government saying. How are we sure that in the next 2 to 3 months, these authorized criminals in uniform will not come back and start attacking the youth again? So I think that's the question.
So how do you want the government to show seriousness?
I think immediate implementations and actions should be done, of course, because even as we speak, as of yesterday, there were some police officers that were still doing stop and search. They still, some SARS officers were still seen around, harassing the citizens. So we're in a world of social media. Everybody now uploads and everybody sees, oh, these same SARS that they said they've disbanded, they're still seen at a location, harassing citizens. So that means these people are lying to us, oh, we're continuing with the protest. So I think immediate implementation should be done instantly. I think there needs to be deterrence meted out immediately to every police officers. We need to start saying, oh, I think the government just needs to focus all its attention on making sure that the citizens now trust in them again. We need immediate implementation. We need immediate investigations into the crimes of these SARS operatives. We need effective and immediate compensation for the victims' families, starting from a committee needs to set up this week. And the people need to see, oh, these people are actually working on it. We need gun control for police officers that needs to go into effect immediately. We need a new justice department. A new justice department that defends and protects the rights of its people. These are things that the government doesn't need to be working on if the protest to be stopping on the protesters. Let the protesters see what you're doing, then by themselves they would calm down.
But the process
right now they're not seeing anything. They're just saying, oh, we've disbanded SARS.
Yeah, but the process has to begin somehow. The conversations have to go on somehow. But the things people are seeing now doesn't seem to be helping much. Just as we said earlier when we began, blocking of the roads, blocking of toll gates, fair enough. But, so many people lost so many man-hours yesterday on the street, even since Sunday. There are those who may have had medical emergencies, job interviews, pregnant women going to the hospital and all of that. And all of those people must have been affected one way or another. And, the youths don't seem to be letting, which is perhaps understandable. But when icons of authority, such as the governor, would appeal to the people and they would not listen, there seems to be some questions there. So what do you suggest leadership should do now to at least assuage the nerves so that progress can be made?
Like you said, the people no longer have faith in the government. So a protest is a call for action. I do not think that what the people are doing is wrong, because that is the only way that they can make their grievances felt. I mean, the people elected these people into power, and they expect to be listened to, they expect to be respected. They see other state nations out there include their youth in decisions, their youth inclusive. But yeah, we do not have that. Where is the committee of youth that we know, oh, they can speak on behalf of the people? There's none of that happening. They don't feel included in the government. They don't feel, oh, if the youth don't have connections to this person or that person, they do not have a say. So the momentum of the moment is just, let's keep building on it. Let's keep building on it. So these people will answer us now. I think, like I said earlier, the government should start implementing plans immediately, because these people, they won't listen. As of today, I mean, there are going to be lots of protests happening around the country, especially in Lagos.
Yeah. Perhaps when you say something should get done immediately, you also remember the discussion between Davido the musician, and the IGP yesterday, where the IGP said, soon as next week, some serious work will begin. As a matter of fact, one of the police officers also mentioned yesterday that the NSAS officers who have been disbanded are being disarmed. So things perhaps are being done, but they are not being seen by everybody. So how do we interface with the youth, or how do you think government can interface with the youth to let them see we are working, even though it doesn't seem like, you know, much is happening, a lot is actually happening?
Like you said now, you said the IGP said next week. So I think the protesters will also say, oh, next week. Okay, we'll protest into next week. So till the plans will be affected. But I agree with you that the protesters need to calm down and let's see what we're working on. We're also working on plans to make sure that the government do not go back on the plans, because, like I said, we do not longer believe in the government. The people have lost faith in the government. I mean, we wanted the IGP to release a VC, he did. Wanted him to come out on national TV, he did. We insisted that Buhari addressed us on national TV, he did. Now you see that there's no longer faith. Like, no matter what they say, there's no faith in it, except they start acting immediately. Right. Now look at the protest that has been happening. We all know that it's a civil right to protest. So now we're hearing cases of protesters being arrested. Meanwhile, we all know it's in the rights of the citizens to protest. So why had they been arrested? So these things, they are being killed. Some people are being killed in Ogbomoso. Some people are being killed in Lagos. They are being tear gassed in Abuja. They are being, this all gives birth to more anger in the people. Like, oh, we're protesting against police brutality, and the police still brutalizing us, still harassing us.
Well, the police in Lagos spoke to one of those cases, one of the shootings, saying that it was a hoodlum trying to free a kidnapper. But we believe that investigation would also go into that. But we understand that there are plans to protest today. But you're of the opinion that the protesters should maybe calm down because the IGP has spoken, the president has spoken. So in the light of that, do you still think there should be a massive protest today in Lagos?
Well, I think the people have the right to express themselves in the way they want to. So if they feel that it's a protest that they can be heard, then I think they should go on. All I think the government should do is they need to engage with intelligence and not with force.
Would you be a part of that protest today?
If the people want me to be there, definitely I will. I'm going to be part of the process.
Now, I wonder...
I start with my people.
Right. I wonder what you make of the happenings in Rivers State about the NSAS protests, and the governor saying, well, the government has listened. SARS has now been disbanded. So there's no need for a protest. I know that has been trending on social media for a while now. But what are your thoughts about that?
The choice of words, I think, yeah, you said the IGP has listened and SARS has been disbanded. I do not think any state government has the right to tell its people that they have banned all form of protest in the state. That is an infringement upon the right. You do not have the right to do that. Sovereignty belongs to the people. Do you understand? Yeah. Sovereignty belongs to the people. Yeah. You don't tell people that you have banned protests in the state. The government needs to engage with intelligence and not with force. It took us long to get here. So many Nigerian youths are scared. So many cannot speak up for their rights because they're scared of being killed. So many they will stay in. They prefer to stay indoors. It has even translated. It has metamorphosed during elections where people do not want to come out because they do not believe that they have rights in their country anymore. They believe, it is whatever they do, let them do it.
Okay.
So now that people are really speaking up.
Okay.
I think they should be allowed to. You cannot tell them that they do not have the right to protest.
Oh,
the
no,
power
no
does
doubt.
not lie. Power does not lie with the government. The power lies with the people.
Yeah, but aren't you afraid that this process could be hijacked? Just yesterday, the Lagos State government said that the person who was who died yesterday, was trying to free a kidnapper, and he wasn't trying to free a protester. So there is the fear also that government could have that hoodlums, criminals could hijack the process. Aren't you afraid of that?
Actually, it's quite unfortunate, even as of now, that there's some people that are pushing their political agenda under the face of the protest, like they are trying to. But I know that the people which are protesting, they have pure hearts and pure minds. They've absorbed all intent of that. So I do not think that the protest can be hijacked. No, these are people that want to speak out. They're not interested in overtaking the government. They're not interested in overthrowing power. They just want their voices to be heard, and they want to feel safe in their own country. They want to feel safe in their own land. They want to be in a state where they are free to move and they are free to talk.
Okay. Well, do stay with us. John Mutu joins us from our Abuja studio. He is a legislative consultant. Well, this has been going on, and I'm wondering, first of all, what kind of legislative intervention, if any, do you think is likely here?
Okay. Thank you so much, Ayo. And good morning, Nigerians. I think this is more or less democracy in action. And I'm glad that our youths have woken up at last. They've decided to take their destiny in their hands, and they've decided also to express their grievances. I'm particularly happy that at least they've not been violent. They've demonstrated peacefully, and they have sent their messages clear. And I'm also happy with the quality of people, youth that have joined this protest. In those days, they will say it is street urchins and all that, but the caliber of people that have joined the protest this time around at least gives some legitimacy to the process. I'm also happy with the response by the President and the Inspector General of Police by quickly intervening and ensuring that the SARS is banned. And particularly, let me recognize the effort of the Lagos State government. I saw the governor yesterday, or I think addressing the demonstrators and appealing to them to give room for further negotiations and dialogue. So I'm quite happy that at least we are seeing our democracy and spaces are being utilized to express grievances in a civil manner. Having said that, you talked about legislative intervention. I think I'm aware that the Speaker of the House of Representatives also have stepped in. I read some of his interventions yesterday where, as a representative, he reached out to his constituents, reached out to the police high command in his constituency, and tried to also intervene in those that were arrested to be released. I think that also is a means of addressing some of those issues. And I pray that all representatives will continue to engage their various constituents, engage their youths, and continue to look for ways of dialogue to resolve this impasse as soon as possible.
For some of the protesters, in fact, for major protesters, they're thinking, well, the government has promised this time and again. They've promised to do this about SARS, reform the police, but nothing has followed. The IGP has now given the statement and said, this is what we're going to do. The president has followed up and said, this is just a part of the bigger picture of reforming the police. But the protesters, we're just speaking to Bola Tito, who we'll go back to in a moment, and she's saying, well, we don't quite have faith in this pronouncement. So for you, what do you think the government needs to do to push this further and say, we mean business, such that the protesters can look and say, well, maybe, just maybe, we can trust in the process?
Yeah, I think I agree with them completely. This is not the first time they've been protesting, and this is not the first time that the police high command has come to say that we are reforming SARS. And it's more or less people have lost faith in government. So we need concrete action like you rightly noted. First thing, I heard the IG saying that most of these SARS operatives will be deployed to other units. When you deploy them to other units, what are they going to be doing in those units? Have they been demobilized? Have they been reoriented for them to be able to act in a civil manner? Are you just maybe putting old wine in a new bottle? What specifically is the plan? I also hear that a new outfit or maybe a new outfit will be, announced soon, and they are going to be trained to engage within a week or thereabout. What kind of training are you going to give to policemen that have been in the system for close to 15, 20 years, that are already used to a particular way of engagement? What are the rules of engagement going to change within 1 week? And if they change, how do you expect them to imbibe them within just 1 week? So specifically, I think there needs to be more information out there. What specifically is the plan? There are people who are even saying that those who have run foul of the law, they know them. All the police high command, they know the police commands, commissioners and all that, the area commanders know those who have been accused of abusing powers. How many of them have been arrested? People want to see concrete actions. If this administration is serious, within the next 2-3 days, we should start seeing policemen, those SARS members who have, perpetrated crimes being arrested, prosecuted, investigated, and all that, so that people can have faith that specific action is being taken. And I don't think you need weeks to do that. And up to this moment, nobody has been called to book. Nobody has, and we have heard that people have been killed, protesters have been killed across the country. What has government done about it? Right. It's not just to address protesters alone. What are the specific actions that the IGP of police has taken based on the president's directive? We need to see concrete actions. I don't know specifically what it is at this point, but people must be seen to be brought to justice.
Okay, let's take this back to Bola Tito. And while you were talking, while Mr. John Mutu was talking, Bola Tito, I was thinking for this generation, because there's a picture on the front page of one of the dailies that shows a protester carrying a placard saying, "You messed with the wrong generation." And for me, I was just thinking, what will this generation want to be remembered for? I mean, this group of protesters and, of course, on a wider scale, this generation. What would you want to be remembered for?
I think, let me start by saying that the past generations, they've endured being harassed, they've endured being brutalized, they've endured being silenced by the people that they elected into power. So they have grown comfortable with it. I mean, most of them. That is why you will see that if a normal Nigerian youth says he wants to go out to protest, the parents will be scared. They'll be like, "Oh, you can't go. Why are you talking up? Why not just keep quiet? What is your business with the protesters? Just keep silent." They just want us to keep silent. I think this new generation will be remembered for speaking up, for a new change, for not being afraid of their own government, for effecting changes. They do not want to be kept silent anymore. They do not want this new generation a generation of change makers, genuine change makers. Right. They go to other countries. They see how other countries work. They see accountability. They see transparency, and they want the same in their own country. They do not want to be victimized in other countries and be victimized in their own mother's land.
Right. Just quickly before we round off the conversation, does this group of protesters, do you have any face, any leader or group of leaders?
Actually, no, and that is the unique thing about it. Yes, we have people that have been pushing for the protests to. We have like frontliners. I will call them frontliners. Like you can see them. They're the one. Anytime the people need encouragement, they're there. Anytime the people need more support, they're there. Anytime the people need to be gingered up, they're there. But they don't have any face. There's no face. There's nobody you can actually pinpoint to that. Oh, this is the person that actually that is heading the protest. No. You see protests springing up everywhere because the people are tired. We have frontliners, I won't deny that. But there's no face, There's no leader, and that is why even the government is finding it difficult to quell the protest because it has no faith.
Thank you so much, Balatito Odwala. You might know her as Reno on Twitter. She's one of the NSARS Now activists. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program.
Thank you.
Well, we'll go on a break now, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to another matter. Please stay with us.
The former Speaker and the person of rights, Honorable Frank Abumeri Okiye, is hereby suspended from the House activities for 3 months to allow proper and uninterrupted investigation into his activities. An ad hoc investigation committee is hereby set up to investigate the tenure of Right Honorable Frank Okiye, especially with regard to finances of the House. All standing committees are hereby dissolved and new committees will be set up in due course. All appointments of aides to Mr. Speaker and other members and former Speaker are hereby terminated with immediate effect. The former Speaker must return all House properties in his possession to the clerk with immediate effect. I remain committed to our working together to achieve the very best for Edo people as we look forward to a robust partnership with the executive arm in ensuring good governance.
Well, while the issues with SARS is still ongoing, just a sneak peek on the State Houses of Assembly, and to have a little conversation on that, we have Ambassador Folake Marcus Bello, is a legal practitioner and former Nigerian ambassador to Zambia and Malawi. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you and good morning.
Well, I can't but at least take your view on this whole NSARS thing. You know, you definitely have felt it one way or another. What do you make of it?
Well, it started as a good cause. If children have a problem and they want their parents to listen, they find a decent way of attracting attention. And the president has come out to say SARS has been proscribed. Now, for me, personally, in the north, they're saying keep SARS. In the southwest and the south-south, they're saying don't keep SARS. From the magnitude and the things we see, I think it's beginning to be as if there's more to it than what we see. So my message and my contribution will be to the youth. They should not allow anybody to use them. The kind of organization, the kind of funding and everything is beginning to look suspect. They should make their point and go back. And they have a power which they don't know. The same power which they use to vote in BB Niger, they should use it when the time comes to register and to vote. They can vote anybody out, they can vote anybody in, they can do anything.
Well, just as you said, some people have also alluded to the fact that perhaps they are also, generally the youths, many Nigerians even, not particularly completely happy with certain policies and programs of government at the various tiers of government, and which, of course, brings us to this conversation about the Houses of Assembly, the legislature, the Houses of Assembly and all of that. There's been a plethora of, impeachments of speakers of Houses of Assembly down through the years, even, as far back as the Second Republic, Third Republic, and even now that we're in this one. There's that concern that, look, what exactly is happening? It would seem like, maybe they are not as serious an arm of government at the state level as they ought to be, or what?
Well, I will join my voice to yours because what we need is education. Not education of PhD and formal education. We don't know our rights. And when I say I'm joining my voice to yours, I'm joining it to Channel Television. You remember there was a program called Your Rights?
Yeah.
Where rights were explained. Nigerians just don't know what is right or wrong. We find ourselves in a position that we are not trained for. And nobody bothers to groom anybody. You understand?
Are you saying that's what's happening in the political class?
That's what's happening everywhere. A policeman doesn't know his limit because he hasn't been trained on his limit. That's why there's SARS problem. The federal government doesn't know when to start or stop. That's why we have all these problems. The three arms are not clearly defined. You know, sometimes you have bullying between them. You know, the legislature is bullied by the judiciary is bullied by the administrative.
Despite the constitutional barriers?
Because nobody's trained. Nobody's trained. There's corruption, there's embezzlement, because the people who are supposed to be the checks at the gate don't even know they have such powers. You understand? And this is going to go on and on and on. We're not talking about formal education, but at least for people to know what is right and what is wrong, and for them to know the powers which they also have.
Well, pardon me, Kade. We have this legislative consultant who has been working with the National Assembly and State Houses of Assembly. He's in our Abuja studio. Mr. Mutu, you heard the fact that the ambassador has said that, look, many of these people are not trained. And I know that you've been a little bit of work in that regard. What do you make of this?
Thank you once again. Trained. I don't think the issue is about training alone, but I think there are far more fundamental issues around the political instability in the state legislature. And maybe that basically can be found in our constitution. Because the constitution just simply says that a speaker or a presiding officer, a speaker or a deputy speaker, can be removed, right, by an address supported by 2/3 majority of members of the House of Assembly. That is all it says, based on gross misconduct. And in our Interpretation Acts, gross misconduct could mean anything. Gross misconduct could mean, as far as the beholder, the person who is accusing, can interpret gross misconduct to mean anything. So if that is what it says, it means that if 2/3, you are able to get 2/3 majority of members of the House of Assembly, at any point in time, a speaker or a deputy speaker can be removed. He has no right to fair hearing. There is no way he can stop that once the 2/3 majority can be achieved. So if that is the situation, I call speakers or presiding officers as endangered species, because they are between two extreme ends. One is trying to please the governor, through whose benevolence he remains on seat or he was elected to be a speaker. And for him to continue to remain a speaker, he must continue to also appease his members. Remember, he's only a first amongst equal. So trying to manage these two extremes is a very difficult case. If he tilts to the governor too much,
if I can butt in,
is not able to bring.
Pardon me,
he's
Mr.
not able
Mutu.
to meet the needs of the members.
Right. Pardon me, I just need to get something.
And before you know it, he's impeached.
If you can hear me, I need to clear something, because, I mean, you said it's based on the benevolence of the governor that the speaker becomes speaker. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I mean, there are different arms of government. This doesn't sound right, but yet it happens. So how is that so? Because if this keeps happening, if the executive wields too much power, too much influence on the legislature, then, I mean, you can only imagine what we'll get out of that kind of legislature. So how did we get to this point, and what can we do to get out of it?
Unfortunately, that is our reality. It starts from the leadership recruitment process. We all know when we emerge from the military, our legislature is still emerging. The executive wields so much power. It has all the resources. It determines who gets what within the states. Also, the electoral machinery for winning elections or retaining your seat largely resides with the governor. So once you have a governor that is so powerful and so overbearing, there is no way you can become a speaker without the blessing of the governor. We've seen that all across all the states, where, and especially you can see what happened in Edo State, where clearly the whole political drama in Edo State revolves around who becomes the Speaker of the State House of Assembly, where the governor wanted to install his person and the leader of the party in the state also wanted to install his own loyalists. So until our democracy evolves to a time where a member can win elections based on his performance, based on his antecedents, we will continue to face what we face as of today. I'm sure you are aware that for a lawmaker to even return to the House, he must continue to dance and pledge loyalty to the governor. Otherwise, once he's seen as too independent, and once he's seen as speaking his mind, he is marked and ensured that he never returns back to the House. Because the machinery for controlling the party, especially the party structure, lies with the governor. So for you to even get renomination of your party, you have to be in the good books of your governor. For you to win the election, you also have to be in the good books of your governor. We have seen where a governor goes against his own party candidate because the party candidate emerged not through his own circles. And he worked against it and ensured that a different the opposition wins that seat. So for me, our democracy is still emerging. And until we also amend our constitution to also create specific processes where, like the issue of the independent candidacy, where people can aspire to become what they want to be without necessarily being subservient to a godfather or without being subservient to the governors. And this journey has started, if you remember, in the last constitutional
so that we can have a well-rounded conversation. If you can hear me, I'd like to come back to Lagos and just get her opinion on some of the issues you have raised. I mean, as far back as May, the president signed that Executive Order 10, granting financial autonomy to, the state legislature. And to that extent, you expect there to be some form of separation of powers. So there shouldn't be that overbearing, influence that the executive will have on the state legislature. But do you think that's enough?
You see, I'm not here to express emotions and sentiments. I'm here, hopefully, to impact on Nigerians to know what our right is. From his own assessment, must our legislature depend on who the governor likes and who the governor doesn't like? Are we going to continue this way? What are the things we can do? I don't believe that it is emerging. After how many years are we going to keep emerging? After how many years are we going to keep giving excuses? The law is clear. For you to appoint, get in a speaker is so and so. When members are seated, they are inaugurated, and they determine amongst themselves who their speaker should be. So perhaps, if they determine amongst themselves who their speaker should be, they also, under the Constitution, have the right, not perhaps, they have the right to remove their leadership. The Constitution of Nigeria is quite conflicting. The interpretation of it can sometimes be dicey, but that's what we have now. In the future, perhaps there will be a proper look at the Constitution and some corrections made, but that's what we have now.
Okay. Well, there is the Constitution.
Yes.
And then there are political structures. I think what Mr. Mutu was referencing is the fact that the Constitution, the provisions of the Constitution, notwithstanding the political dynamics that we have, the play of our politics as we have it as at now, makes it such that the executive seems to topple the role of the legislature in the Constitution, because in the Constitution, whether at the federal or state level, the legislature comes before the executive. That would suggest something, but it would seem like that's not the way we play the politics of it. So I think that's what he's referencing, the fact that the governor, because he controls the political structure of the ruling party in the state, the other units, other elements, the legislature, the judiciary, they seem to come under. How can we correct that?
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. Even a speaker probably doesn't know what he's supposed to do.
How is that possible?
It's possible. I'm going to go back to training and being trainable.
But they have this,
I agree with him.
I
agree with him.
Yeah.
that we're paying the price for the leadership which we have elected. But the truth of this matter is that it is an illegality what has happened in Edo State. But Edo State is also an example for us all now that if we all rise up, vote, register to vote and vote, we can vote out godfathers.
Well, this illegality, is it what happened recently or from the beginning of the life of the State Assembly in this tenure?
Do you know there was a first removal of a speaker? It was done by 17 members then. This current one was done by 9. The question you also then need to look at is that there are 24 members as stipulated by the Constitution. Members of the State House of Assembly can be between 24 and 40. Edo State has 24. Out of these 24, I believe about 14 of them or so have been locked out since last year. Unfortunately, by judgment of the Supreme Court, they cannot sit elsewhere in any other building except the building that is called the House of Assembly. So the others have been locked out. Whether
locked
they are
out?
Blocked out totally. They have not been able to sit.
Is it a function? Because you know how this plays.
No,
One
it's
side
politics.
says, well, we invited you, you didn't come.
It's politics. And the governor of Edo State just outsmarted everybody because when they were going to come into the house, he brought in trailers, removed the ceiling and everything and said he was renovating the house. So they couldn't sit anywhere and they have not been able to have access.
Wait, are you talking about the members that had not been inaugurated?
Yes, the question is whether they have been inaugurated or not. Are they still members? Two answers. One, because they have not been inaugurated, because they are members of the House of Assembly, and the Constitution says you must have 2/3, which is 12. What has happened is an illegality. Now, there's another part of the Constitution that stipulates the number of days you must sit in a year to continue to be relevant as a member of the House. They have not been able to sit for that stipulated time. And the former Speaker had actually called for to declare their seat vacant. He was blocked by another judiciary. So are we saying that we're going to continue to wait? It is the people. It is the people of Edo State. It is the people of Nigeria who should rise up now, ensure that they register and they vote.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, there's a question that you have just raised, and I think maybe Mr. Mutu will be able to answer it decisively for us. So as far as you are concerned, and from what you know about this matter, and this is not the first time we are having the minority in a House of Assembly pretty much taking over the functions of the majority in the House of Assembly. Some have referenced, Ogun State at one point in history, and now Edo State. So, to the question that the ambassador has asked, what happens to those 17 or 14 members of the House of Assembly?
As far as, in my view, and to the best of my knowledge, those members, as of today, are no longer members of the Edo State House of Assembly. First, they were not inaugurated because up till the time that their seats were declared vacant, they were still members-elect. And once you are a member-elect, you have not sworn to the oath of office, or you have not been sworn in, you remain member-elect. And once you're a member-elect, you cannot participate in any of the legislative proceedings until you are sworn in. And unfortunately, they refused to present themselves to be sworn in until after the 180 days in a year that was prescribed by the Constitution. And the Speaker declared their seats vacant until there is an interpretation by the court, because they are in court now, and until there is a definite interpretation by the court, they will continue to remain non-members of the State House of Assembly. The only members that are recognized as of today, members of the House of Assembly, are the ones that were sworn in and inaugurated on that day that the House was proclaimed. 2/3 of that number, I think they are about 10, 2/3 of 10 will be about 6. Once you can get 6, because you can't get 6.5 or minimum 7. Once you can get 7 of them sitting to impeach a speaker, that impeachment remains valid. As of today, 9 of them sat and impeached him. Those are the ones that are recognized and they met the 2/3 threshold. I don't want to dabble into whether the inauguration was right or wrong because the court has already...
One moment, before we go to that one, Mr. Mutu, just one moment, before we go there, I can see that the ambassador here is shaking your head. You're shaking your head about something.
I did, because I sat up all night reading the Constitution and making sure I understand what it says. The Constitution is clear. If you permit me,
please.
Just one line. That's what I say. We need to educate ourselves. Now, Chapter 5 of the Constitution deals with the legislature. Part 1 is the National Assembly. Part 2 is the State Assembly. Section 90 creates the Assembly. Section 92 creates the position of the Speaker and the Deputy. Now, under Section 92, it talks about the removal of a Speaker. To remove a Speaker, you need a vote of not less than 2/3. This is Section 92, 2C part. Not less than 2/3 majority of the members of the House. I beg to disagree with him. For me, the Constitution also states clearly that in every House of Assembly in Nigeria, the numbers are between 24 and 40. Based on the representation at the National Assembly. So Edo State has officially 24 members of the Assembly. Whether the 24 members are there or not is a different matter. The Constitution says there are 24. I agree with him in total about the members that have missed their 181 days of sitting and they have not been inaugurated. But the fact that they are not there does not mean that the House of Assembly is different. What the Constitution stipulates for the House of Assembly is different from the numbers that are there. For example, we have lost some senators now. By-elections are coming up. Are we now going to say that members of the National Assembly that have died should not be counted?
Are you calling for a by-election for those House speakers, those members of the House?
I told you before. It's complicated now. The speaker that was ousted yesterday, you know that he also gained that seat when somebody else was ousted. So at his own time, he had called for a by-election to fill those positions. And a federal high court in Rivers said, no, you cannot call for by-elections to fill the positions. Now, but all that is neither here nor there. We know in Nigeria a lot of politics will be playing, but it is important that people know.
Well, you know, he said, and you agreed with him.
24
yeah.
is 16.
Agreed, but the members of the House of Assembly now are 10.
You can't say now. What does the Constitution say? That's exactly my point. If the Constitution says they should be 24, 24 were voted in, 12 of them have been prevented from going to the House, that does not mean that the sitting of the House has changed. That does not mean that with wishful thinking, you can change the Constitution of the House.
Okay, just quickly, ladies and gentlemen, are we saying that the Houses of Assembly who have been involved in this, are you saying they have been acting illegally over the years?
Oh, it's an illegality, but the confusion from our Constitution, I'll take you to it again. And it says, majority, just 1 minute, this is important to help your question. It's just 1 second. That Constitution also talks about, what's the word now? Quorum.
Yeah.
The quorum is different from the membership.
It is really getting interesting. Well, Mr. Mutu, very quickly, if the Houses of Assembly have been acting according to what we have been discussing so far, has this been an illegality from what the ambassador told us so far?
Again, let me come back to the issue. I said our Constitution has created a lot of room for people to play politics with most of these issues. I am not in support of most, and from the beginning I said it, most of these issues, you cannot just wake up and impeach a speaker without giving him the right of fair hearing. That is one. The case of Edo State is a peculiar issue. As at today, in the eyes of the law, there are only 10 members of the Edo State House of Assembly. The quorum of the House of Assembly is 1/3. So if you have 8 persons, the House can sit. Are we saying that because the House is not complete, we don't have 24? Are we saying that a speaker cannot be impeached? If you say a speaker cannot be impeached until we have 24 members, then the procedure for his election was also faulty.
Well, Mr. Mutu, permit me, pardon me, we really have come to a point where we can't take it further because of our time, but we have to thank you very, very much. Most certainly, this is a conversation that has to continue. We have to thank you very much for your time this morning. John Mutu is a legislative consultant as well as Ambassador Folake Marcus Bello. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, this is ongoing, definitely, but we have just one more issue before we go today. Just stay with us.
To say a word on the recent genuine concerns and agitations by Nigerians about the excessive use of force and in some cases extrajudicial killings and wrongful conduct by men of the Nigerian police force. The disbanding of SARS is only the first step in our commitment to extensive police reform in order to ensure that the primary duty of the police and other law enforcement agencies remains the protection of lives and livelihoods of our people. We will also ensure that all those responsible for misconduct or wrongful acts are brought to justice. We also deeply regret the loss of life of the young man in Oyo State during the recent demonstrations. I have directed that the circumstances of his death should be thoroughly investigated. Meanwhile, it is important to recognize that the vast majority of men and women of the police force are hardworking and diligent in performing their duties. The few bad eggs should not be allowed to tarnish the image and reputation of the force.
Well, joining us now to look at the other angles to the issue of the EndSARS movement, we have Ismail Ahmed, who is a member of the APC, as well as Segun Shoumi, a member of the PDP. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Ahmed. So the president has spoken, the IGP has spoken, the vice president has spoken, and a number of leaders are also lending their voice to the EndSARS protests. Actions have been taken so far, and the protests are still going on. It would suggest like maybe the message is not strong enough to the people. What do you make of it?
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I think that's the question that is on the mind of a lot of people this morning, why is the protest still ongoing? But I think we have to look at it from different perspectives. We as a party, first and foremost, emphatically endorse what the president has said and what the Inspector General of Police has said. I represent young people in the party structure. I also understand that that this goes beyond the disbandment of SARS, for example. I think over the years, successive, administrations of the police force have created some sort of a chasm between the police and the people. And I know I've seen it on social media several times that people didn't believe it when the Inspector General of Police announced the disbandment of SARS, because they said this is not the first time that this announcement has been made. There are so many times that different IGPs at different times have announced the disbandment of roadblocks or checkpoints, and yet in the same evening of that announcement, you would drive around town or on the highways and you still see the same checkpoints of police officers with such glaring impunity. So I think over the years there has been a breakdown of trust between the police and the people. And now this trigger of the NSAS protest now kind of make a lot of people believe that it has to go beyond just rhetorics of saying we have disbanded them, because these things have been said before. We have to see clear actions. And I'm glad that the IGP in his press conference not only said that we have disbanded the SARS unit, but he went ahead and itemized a couple of few steps that are going to be done. But I think much more than that, they have to realize, the police force has to realize that there's a complete mistrust between what they say and what actually happens. Okay. And over the years, this pent-up anger and frustration has come to a certain fore that it has to be seen, justice has to be seen to be done. Okay. But we as members of a political party who are governing are also very aware of the fact that we need to, the reform has to go the whole gamut. Okay. And I'm glad the president mentioned it yesterday, because he said that the disbandment of SARS is just the beginning of the extensive reforms that we're going. And we are also collating, as members of the party, we're also collating different ideas that we'll present to government. But I think ultimately it has to go more than just about the disbandment of SARS or only police restructuring, reforms. It has to go on so many things. It's about law and order in its entirety. It's about accountability. Okay. All right. It's about knowing that now, for example, if a police officer assaults you or there's a professional misconduct, a lot of Nigerians, I can tell you for free, a lot of Nigerians do not know where to take that to. They only know that if a police officer assaults you, or if there's a professional misconduct on the part of a police officer on the road or in your house, he thinks that the only way that he can report to that police officer is through social media. All right, now, Mr. Ahmed, police officer, he believes there can be a conspiracy to fight against him. So I think these things have to be clear. There has to be clear reforms, and there have to be timelines. The IGP has to go on. Which pronouncements disbanded this? Yes, which pronouncements have already been made, Mr. Ahmed? The pronouncements have already been made. Let me take this to Mr. Shomi now. So the pronouncement has been made, and some would say that, look, before any meaningful action can be taken, the first thing is to make a pronouncement and walk it, through a process before we begin to take action. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to tell ourselves is that when you act in a particular way when you are in opposition, you would teach the citizens a particular set of conduct. Deadline 2012, when the issue on the table was deregulation and the removal of the subsidy. Rather than the leaders or the present leaders of the country, who are inclusive, allow the people to vent, they jumped in front of the train and began to provide energy and oxygen for that agitation. Roll back to 2020 now, the people are agitating about SARS, but can you see any PDP leader pushing them on and urging them on and trying to make it even worse?
We are not like them. Therefore, obviously, they have themselves to blame for promising much and delivering little. The critical component of what you should think about is, do the people trust them? It's clear that, okay, the president has spoken, the IGP has spoken, and yet the people don't trust them. Why don't they trust them? Because they have made themselves into a people who never action their words, whose words do not mean anything to the Nigerian people. Now, what will I want to say generally on the SARS protest? You see, we need a police force that will work for all of us. And luckily, we are all Nigerians. We know the policeman from the minute to step out of our house all the way to going to the office and all of that, engaging them, having issues, and watching on social media. We have known for a long time that we do not have a police force that is fit for purpose. How long does it take to reform a police force? It ordinarily should have started from day one. Well, it is what it is. The people are protesting now. We just want to say,
but
protest
Mr. Shomu, just one moment.
People in a democracy.
Yes, just one moment, Mr. Shomu. You referenced the other time. You said, we have a history of a police system that hasn't been working for people, and of course, you seem to agree with Mr. Ahmed there. But then he also said something that, look, successive administrations haven't really helped the police system to work the way it ought to work. The reforms shouldn't have been something that should have waited until now. It should have happened years before. You also remember that report from this organization where, under the administration of your government at the time, some serious issues raised about the welfare of the police, and of course nothing has been done so far, at least maybe significantly at that time, even though some actions were taken. But then perhaps the fruit of what we are reaping now dates back to the root of those days. What would you say to anyone thinking like that?
There is a difference. There is a difference. There is a marked difference. The marked difference is that nobody sends the police to go and beat and kill and shoot protesters. People were allowed to protest, and we engaged them until we were able to come to an agreement. Right now, what you see is that people are being jailed in Ogun State. Someone has been killed in Ogbomoso. People have been killed in Surulere, in Lagos, maiming and all of that. Look, you cannot have a strong arm all the time, especially when the issue are the ones that everybody can see really deserve attention. So as far as we're concerned, we are not a political party in leadership that throws bullets at protesting people. That's not who we are. And I'm sure that they themselves have learned that the people are not exactly going to relent easily, and probably a different approach may be required. And I would just want to say to the protesters, you have made your point. Your message is heard loud and clear by everybody. And I'm sure that at some point in time, there has to be an exit out of protest. For we cannot protest and then be told, okay, we'll work on it, and then say we're going to continue protesting. That's not how it works. You protest because you have the right of freedom to protest. When they react, you back off and give them some time to action what they said. And if they don't action them, obviously other options can be available. But you cannot do a copycat protest and insist that a copycat protest, which is probably learned from other civilization and other country, will now be the way you want to run your country. Definitely, we are not that kind of people who desire that things should not work here. But we want to say very clearly, without apology, that the President Muhammadu Buhari administration have not handled it right. They have to call the police people to order. They have to let them understand that their duty during a protest is to protect everybody, including the protesters, not to kill them.
Well, Mr. Ahmed, you heard Mr. Shomi. In fact, the PDP is also calling for the reform of the Nigeria police. And this, casts my mind back to the president's October 1st speech, where he says that, those that presided over the near destruction of Nigeria from 1999 to 2015, and he described that as impudence. So the PDP is, in some sense, criticizing the government and saying, you need to do better for the police and, of course, for the people. Do you think that is still impudence?
Well, you know what? I try as much as possible not to politicize this issue. As much as possible, I try to stay above the fray. I think Mr. Shomi is someone I have respect for. And I don't know where he was when PDP is in government, was in government, I don't know. But to say that, there were no high-handedness on the part of the police during the administration of the PDP is simply not so. And I know it was Channels TV that was that took a tour of the Ikeja Police College or something, sometime in 2012 or 2013, during the administration of PDP, and showed the rot that was called a police college, where police recruits were being trained to become police officers as a result of that. So, but let's not get into the politics of what party has done what or where. I think I try to stay above that. I try to make sure that let's focus on what the issues are. This thing's call for a reform. There needs to be a reform. The president is absolutely committed to that. I wish that some of these issues are not even allowed to get to the table of the president, because these are issues that can be dealt with on the level of the IGP or the Minister of Police Affairs. These are people who are appointed by the president, given the trust of the president to do these things. Not every issue. Is very unfair for some of our political appointees to drag the president onto every issue. And I think this issue could have been dealt with at the right time, but unfortunately it was not. The vice president got involved, the president got involved, they have made their statements. It is time now for us, like Mr. Shomi said, to back off, for the protesters to back off, to make sure now that we follow through and we make sure that accountability is a two-way thing. For those who are doing the things and for those who are watching, to make sure that you give us time to see whether we are going to action some of these things. And on the part of IGP, I think there should be clear timelines. In 30 days, this is what we are going to do. In 60 days, so that people will be able to follow and go through with that. And I think I don't want to get into whether there is, we all know how I feel about, how the PDP now, or members of the opposition, people who have done what, I don't want to use words for, and would come up and think that at every given opportunity they want to take a stab at us. But I guess it's a political system. It's okay for people to take legitimate concerns of other people and try to turn it into something else. But I don't want to get into politics of it. I think there is a protest. I think demands have been met. I think government has responded positively to that. And statements have been made. The president have got in, the IGP has got in, the vice president has got in. It is time now for the citizens to watch back and see whether these actions are going to be followed through. And I think that's the most important thing right now.
Just before we bring in Mr. Showumi on this, I recall that he mentioned, he said that the government is employing strong arm tactics in resolving this. And for a lot of the protesters, in fact, some of the visuals we put out, you could hear the protesters chanting, "We want the president to address us." For them, he took quite some time for the president to address this issue. Well, you said you don't think the president should address every issue, but for them, this is not just any issue. This is something that is important to them. And they're saying, we've not asked for a lot, really. This is just what we're asking for. So really, what is the thinking behind that process of having to wait for some time before the president addresses, at least comes out to address these issues?
Now, first of all, let me correct something. I didn't say the president should not address people. I said it never should have gotten to the level where the president needs to address the people. If this thing had been nipped in the bud, if the people who were appointed by the president had acted, immediately, with clarity, I'm sure the people would not have demanded the president to address them. But it got to a point where the only voice they wanted to hear was that of the president, who has the mandate of the people, which is a fair statement. And the president did address the people. What I'm saying is that we as appointees, I'm also an appointee of government, There are certain things, if it is within my circle, we shouldn't allow at every juncture. There are certain things, of course, that only the president would speak about, or the vice president, people who are elected, who have the mandate, the electoral mandate of the people to address. There are certain things that have to be that way. There are certain things that are so humongous that are that way. But a unit of a police force that has gone rogue, or some members of them have gone rogue, it's an operational issue that I think the IGP or the police force or whoever, the Minister of Police Affairs, should have nipped in the bud from beginning. It never should have escalated or be allowed to metastasize to this level where the citizens will be demanding an address from the president. But it has happened. The clarity, and the president has said from the beginning, allow protesters to protest. It's an inalienable right of the protesters, their constitutional right to protest and show their grievances. What has happened as a result of the response of the police that were supposed to guard, as far as I'm concerned, the protesters, especially the killing of the young man in Oyo, which the president mentioned, it's rather unfortunate. The use of cannon hot water on individuals and protesters is absolutely unfair. I think it's something that the president also condemned. But you see, that's also part of the problem which I keep talking about. When a police IGP would come in the morning, for example, and it has nothing to do with this IGP. It has been happening way before this. I can remember.
Yeah.
You know, when the IGP would come and say all the checkpoints have been banned, you know, and then in the evening there will be checkpoints.
Okay. Well, let's go back to Mr. Shomi. Just one moment. Just one moment, Mr. Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed, just one moment. Mr. Shomi, over the years, there has always been that point where people always demand to hear the voice of the president. Doesn't that look like we always seem to over-centralize the issues as opposed to allowing the institutions to work, as Mr. Ahmed said?
First things first, in the case of the Buhari presidency, the issue is really more like Rome is burning and Nero is sleeping. All of the time and most of the time, what you have with the Buhari presidency is that it's as if you have to beg them, you have to push them, what's the big deal about the president talking? He doesn't do much as it is anyway. And for the reasons why the Nigerians always want their president to talk, it goes down to the issue of restructuring. You cannot eat your cake and have it. If you want all of the power in the presidency, then it therefore follows that the people are going to expect the president to even help them to sweep the streets. Fundamental issues are you have a structure that is not working, you have put too much power and too much responsibility on one man called the president, and then you're saying the president doesn't want to talk. It doesn't work that way. And now back to the issues of SARS. What is playing out is beyond SARS. And when we talk about their high-handedness in protest, it's beyond this one event. I cannot count the number of times this Amazon in our country, who has become the face of liberation now, Aisha Yusuf, has been manhandled just because they are protesting. It's constantly increasing. Now we have a position where people are dying. Some of their governors are behaving true to type in the same way. And the president has spoken. And you are wondering why the people don't believe. How many things have the president and his party said in the past that has come to pass? Which of them have they actioned very, very quickly? And you cannot make a lackadaisical, lack of empathy speech when you can see that your people are dying. Young people are dying. And pardon me, if I'm not as cool and calm, because what we see here is a near crisis that, if it is not well managed, could go out of hand.
But Mr. Shomi, pronouncements have been made towards action. Shouldn't that at least assuage some emotions for now so that action can actually begin in earnest?
Well, you heard me loud and clear when I said to the protesters that, look, protesters, you have spoken, you have used your right of protest. I apologize on behalf of their government if they don't know how to do that. We're very sorry. The system is sorry that one or two people, a lot of people have been manhandled. The president has spoken. Now it's time for us to calm down and allow them to act. Thank goodness God you've gotten your voice. Therefore, it doesn't have to be a prolonged disruption of everything, including the workforce and money and economy of the country. The point is made, and we will all be on the lookout to the quick actions. And in that regard, we are demanding a complete review and reform of the entire police force. What's the point in taking stars off the road and putting them into the other part of the police force so that these elements will go down and start misbehaving, even on civil things? We have to understand, we cannot insist that we will not have a police force that is fit for purpose. It is not Latin. It is simple English and common sense. If we don't have, if it is time for us to have multi-layer policing, there's no point passing the buck and going around the circle. Just go ahead and make it happen. If you need to retire some police officers and recruit an elite set of police officers that will do elite job based on training and the best practices, just go ahead and do that.
Well, Mr. Ahmed, so this is where we are now, and action has begun from what the president from what all of these individuals have said, the president, vice president, IGP, and so many other forces, what should the people, because another issue that a number of people have had is that of timeline, just as you also alluded to, promises, and after some time, we seem to go back on our words. How can we persuade people now, in closing?
First of all, to answer, I said I don't want to talk about politics, but Mr. Shomi keeps bringing me back to it. And he said that it doesn't take anything to reform the police. Yes, and I remember PDP has been in government for 16 years, and yet they did not reform the police, and we are trying to do something right now. Yes, people do not believe there's a mistrust as a result of 16 years of so many failed promises of reformations, of moving away checkpoints and stuff like that. We are 5 years in government, and yes, that there's a carryover of that mistrust which we have to rectify now, and which is exactly what we are going to do. We are going to hold our own government to account. We are going to hold ourselves to account to make sure that we follow through with some of the promises that we have made, either through the address of the president or the IGP and the vice president, as the case may be. That's one. Two, right now, persuasion could only come from action. The protesters are still out, as I'm made aware. So I think the most important thing is for us, is for the protesters to hold back and give us some time to be able to fulfill some of these promises that we have made, especially in regards to,
yes. Thank you. Let me ask Mr. Shomi, what will be your final word now, practically speaking, because as some people have said, the issues are way bigger than SARS. What will be your final passing shot?
Well, I would just want to first of all speak to the protesters and to Nigerians. Nigerians, protest does not mean torpedoing everything within the country. Protest means using the pedagogy of that language to make a point. Once the point is made and the reaction starts, it means the protest has been successful and there is no sense in prolonging it. So I want to tell the protesters, okay, you've made the point. Now they've heard, they won't disrespect you the next time. First point. Second point, I want to apologize and commiserate with all of the people who have either been brutalized or have lost one. These are some of the unintended consequences of the system. Please do not get so angry until you let things boil over. And to the Buhari government, you cannot be 5 years plus in government and be talking about the 16-year mistake. That's in the past. We are talking about the now. And as far as the now is concerned, the buck stops on your table. Give us police reform, give us a restructured country, and let's go and fix this country and make it great. And if you cannot get the job done, please, there's nothing wrong in throwing in the towel and leaving.
Mr. Segun Shomi, a member of the PDP, as well as Ismail Ahmed, a member of the APC. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Well, quick messages from you on this issue. You have one waiting.
Oh, yeah, a couple of messages. Okay, I take that back. A lot of messages, but we'll take a few of them. Now, this one from Elizabeth Okor says, how can the IGP redeploy men that use words like waste him to other units? She says, my husband was a live victim of SARS at Kiadola Road to Benin City. This SARS unit, she says, they're beasts, monsters that will do anything for money. They have more criminal intentions than armed robbers, she says.
Barrister George Akpambo says, kindly inform our sister in the studio that's talking about the issue before now.
We had two sisters.
well, that's true. I think she was talking about the electoral process, the legislature.
All right.
Kindly inform our sister in the studio that election does not work in Nigeria, so she should allow the youth to express themselves. There are real fundamental issues in Nigeria that need to be addressed as we are running out of time.
Speaking of running out of time.
We have run out of time. We have to thank you very much for your watching this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Do not forget, we need to be safe because COVID-19 is still very much out there. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day and please keep safe.
And I'm Kayode Kikele. Goodbye.